My name is Justus. I'm the creative director for a platform called Shared Moments with Justus. Basically, it's a digital space where we create content, uh, measuring on human interest kind of stories, and then we're able to distribute digitally, both on social media and TV. So currently we have our main outlet being the YouTube channel. We have Shared Moments with Justice YouTube channel where we share most of that content. Of course, we are on those other smaller, platforms, and then on mainstream media as well. Growing up, I think I had not a very interesting childhood, but interesting then. But when I look at it from now, it doesn't look like it was interesting. But I think it's from that my inspiration, to be in a space where I can create content or allow people to express themselves must have stemmed from. There wasn't much in terms of expression during our time growing up. Whatever older people say, it goes. So there was no room to question things. There was no room to say, I don't like this or I like this. So you accept what comes your way. So growing up in that kind of space somehow limited our imagination. It limited our creativity. And so coming from that background and finding myself in, a cosmopolitan kind of environment where people are, expressive, it was kind of, confusing. Meeting people my age who are as expressive as no one's business. I was like, kwani hao waligrow wapi, And so that began to inspire me to actually want to, if not for myself, create a space where other people can actually express themselves as they should, especially kids who are coming up, to live a life that I would have wanted to live as a kid. And so, there are a lot of stories that I can remember growing up in my childhood that were quite exciting. But the thing about life is when you're in an environment where you don't know nothing more than that which you're seeing, then it becomes your world. So you don't begin to even imagine that you're losing out. Until you expose yourself more is when you realize that actually there could be something I missed out on growing up. So now, as an adult, I'm trying to compensate for the things I missed out, but this time not for myself, but creating an enabling environment that would help another kid growing up or someone else even in their adult life to begin to, appreciate and more or less enjoy some of those privileges that I missed out on. There are quite a number of things that have happened in my life that have been an inspiration, perhaps behind me coming out to now want to create this space where other people can express themselves. Apart from that childhood inspiration, and there's a story I keep sharing about my childhood on how one day, we were in the house and there were visitors who came in. I grew up in the village, just for context, so that other people who grew up in town can be able to relate. I grew up in the village. And I remember one day there were visitors who came to the house. And as the norm was, when visitors come, the kids would sit on the floor and the visitors would sit on the seat because the chairs were not enough. So that time we are seated on the floor. And because the visitors had just come, they had entertained themselves, they were about to leave, and so we were called back into the house so that we can pray the visitors to leave. So I remember that time we came into the house, we sat on the floor as the norm was, and so the visitors stood up so that we can have a word of prayer before they leave. When they did stand, I remember I was sitting next to one of the seats, and when the guy stood up, he actually stepped on my tiny fingers. I was about 4 to 5 years at the time, but I still remember that day. So when he stood up, he actually stepped on my little fingers, but because of the environment, I couldn't even say that someone was stepping on me. So you can imagine he didn't move his foot until he finished praying, and for like 2-3 minutes, the most painful minutes of my life, I was there hoping that this prayer will end so that this guy can move his leg. And I didn't even open my mouth after that to express or to say to anyone the pain that I went through during that prayer. But you see, it speaks to an environment that was created that took away my voice. And so as an adult, when I reflect on that memory, it just inspires me to want to create a space where kids can express themselves, people can express themselves freely, so that no one has to go through pain because their voice was taken away. Now, fast forward, that memory was just that, a memory, until I found myself in the media space as a journalist, just going about business, sharing stories and documenting things. Normally, nothing really much about it. But about 2012, in 2010, I should say, I was in Langata Women's Prison covering some stories, and I did a story about an inmate, one of the ladies who was in prison at the time. Her name is Beatrice, and I shared that story with the media that I was working with at the time. I shared it online. Around 2014 is when YouTube was becoming a thing. So I shared it on YouTube in 2014. I forgot about it. In 2019 towards 2020, I received a phone call from supposedly this lady who I had done her story back in 2010 when she was in prison. So she called me, "Oh, hi, my name is Beatrice. I've been really looking for your number, and thank God I found you. You remember the lady who you did her story back then, as young lady who was in prison?" And I'm like, "Yeah, Beatrice, I remember. But it's been almost 10 years. Like, yeah, it's me. I'm out. And I just wanted to reach out to you and say thank you for covering my story, because it played a huge role in having me out here." So I'm like, "Really?" And even just the thought of you reaching out after all those many years, it prompted me to begin to think the power of storytelling and how much influence and impact sharing our stories and conversations would have. So I was interested in actually knowing how she got to get my number. And then she told me there's a white lady from the UK who had actually reached out to me looking for her number because she watched the story online. And I remember telling that lady, "I haven't heard much about Beatrice, but I'll be on the lookout. If I find her contacts, I'll let you know." So that white lady got Beatrice's number before I did. And that's how she shared the number with Beatrice, and Beatrice ended up reaching out to me. So when that all happened, it put me into that aha moment. I'm like, I think there's something in here about these stories. So I asked Beatrice if she would be interested for me to do a follow-up story, because it's been almost 10 years. You're out here. She told me she's been out since 2012. I was like, that's a huge time. So she agreed. We sat down, catched up, and did a follow-up story with Beatrice. When I recorded that story, I didn't know where I was going to share it. I didn't have my YouTube channel, the one that I have at the time. So after recording that story, I told Beatrice, I'll figure out how to distribute this story, because I think it belongs to the world. The world needs to know, this kind of conversations and the story that you have gone through. So that's when actually the idea of creating the YouTube channel that we currently have came into mind. And even the name itself, Shared Moments, those were moments to be shared. So I created the channel Shared Moments with Just Us, and that was my first story. From there, it's been one story after the other, just sharing memories, experiences of people, lived experiences that are inspiring, are motivating, and just giving hope to people that despite everything else you've gone through, there's always something to look forward for, and there's always something to celebrate, even in the pain that you perhaps have experienced. So what was an assignment was me going to the prison to cover the stories. That was the assignment. But when I got there and did the stories and shared like I was expected to, little did I know that that would be actually 10 years later be the beginning of this other grand idea to actually now make it my mainstream. So I just went there as an assignment, did the story. But of course, at the back of my mind, the stories had a way of speaking to me, still do. Like, there's a way stories just speak volumes to me. And so even doing it as an assignment, I was still feeling the burden to be able to use my profession, use my skills and talent for the betterment of people. So that was the drive, because in the mainstream media, I realized pretty fast that it didn't matter so much what the real story was, as long as it's a story that would bring in revenue, would, turn the numbers. That was more important than the actual story. So I felt there was a lot getting lost in the process of, people telling stories, or the media telling the story. It was a very one-sided approach. So I wanted the people to tell their own story, and that informed even the format that we finally adopted on this particular channel. It is not me sharing someone's story. It is that person sharing their story in their own words, in their own way, without coercion, without being, led in a certain way. So that's how all that happened. 4 years later, because this is the 4th year since we began the space, in 2024, it's much easier now to have people coming out to share their stories, especially on very personal, intimate, some, details that not everyone would be willing to share publicly. In 2024, it's a little much easier. When we began, it was more difficult to actually convince anyone to come out in the public, in the media, to share some of the moments that are even embarrassing to share, talk about. So what I did was to capitalize on my network, because I was quite networked. I don't know if I still am. I was quite networked in the past. And so I didn't have to look too far. After I did Beatrice's story, the next question was actually, who else? So within my network, I tried to, talk to as many people as I could that I know had a very good story that maybe they had shared with me, to convince them that this story actually belongs to the world. So most, of course, majority turned me down, but a few who did opened the door for many others, because human beings want to wait and see until someone else does it, and then they're like, oh, maybe I should give it a try. So before we did the first stories, it was very difficult to convince anyone that actually this is the right thing to do. But the more we continued sharing these stories, it was much easier when you reach out to anyone who you perhaps know their story or have heard their story from somewhere else. It was not very difficult to convince them. Currently, because of we've shared over 400 stories, of stories from over 400 people, and since we have that history, it's much easier when you're talking to someone. I think you need to come and share your story, then at least there's some reference. You can give them a link to see what else you have done, and it makes them now feel like this is something that is normal to do. So there are stories that I intentionally reach out once, maybe from the network, someone says, there's this person with such a great, inspiring story. Could you perhaps reach out and see if it's something you can share? Then we do that. There are others who also reach out to us because the platform now is out there. They have seen, they've been encouraged from what we have been sharing, and they feel like it's time for them to also share. They reach out, but when they do, we have to also interrogate to make sure that whatever information we are sharing is genuine information, is factual information, so that we don't malign other people's names in the process of taki kusanitize watu, unakuja kujisanitize ukiharibia mse mwingine jina because there's a platform. People can also take advantage of that. So we try to have our own mechanism of making sure that whatever we are also sharing is representative of what we stand for, but it's also factual. The problem with digital media is when something is shared, it's shared to the world. And when it goes out there, if it's supposed to inspire, it will inspire many. But if it causes damage, that damage is also greatly felt. So we have had instances where we've shared content. We've allowed people to come and share their own personal stories, but because there's no one who has a personal story that does not touch on another human being, you'll always have someone coming in sharing their experience, but by extension, saying how that impacted other people or how other people impacted their own experience. And whether that is true or not is not necessarily the issue, but there are people who, when they are mentioned in other people's conversations, they don't take it so well. So we've had instances where other people, third parties, reach out because they have been mentioned in a conversation we've hosted here, and they are not comfortable with that kind of information being shared publicly. So where that puts you is, the good thing is, because we do background checks, so that person might not necessarily be saying the information is wrong. They're just not comfortable having that kind of information, in the public domain. So what we do is we make sure that before anyone comes to sit here and share their story, they understand very well that whatever they are saying, they can only be held responsible, and not me, not the organization. So if you're coming to share, we give them consent forms, first of all, to allow us to share their information on our platform, but also by extension, they are agreeing that they will take full responsibility of everything they say on this platform. So if there's any other third party that has an issue, they cannot raise it with us. Of course, they can, but we advise them the right person to raise it with would be the person who shared that. But of course, with all being sensitive enough and making sure that even as we do that, we don't allow people to just come and discredit or share information that is damaging to other third parties without evidence. I have had quite a number of stories from the guests that have been here to share their journey that were really moving and changed my perspective on many things. We've shared stories from people who have struggled with addictions. We've shared stories of people who have struggled with mental health issues, stories of people who've had health challenges, stories like from all walks of life. One story I remember was of a guy named Solomon. Solomon Kilanga was born in a very humble family until he found himself in a very affluent neighborhood, because the mother, who was a single mother then, had just gotten married to this pilot from Tanzania, who was really like living the life in the leafy suburbs then of Westlands in the 70s. So Solomon finding himself suddenly in a very leafy environment, where he cannot really understand why he had been plucked from that humble, normal kind of life into a space where he's the only black kid in an all-white school and all that kind of thing. So it was confusing for him. So what that did to Solomon is it destabilized him, so much so that he felt out of place, something that perhaps sounds like a paradox, where most kids would want to find themselves in such an environment, but for him, it was not adding up. And so because the environment did not help him transition properly, he ended up into drugs. And so Solomon, went all the way into drugs, that when he was around 17, 18, he actually ran away from home, got himself he became a street boy, left all the wealth, left everything. He went to live in the streets, and he was an addict, struggling with addiction, serious addiction. For a lot of years, more than 10 years, he was on the streets. So by the time Solomon was here telling this story, of course, he had now, he had been rehabilitated, and he was now running a rescue center for men who are in the streets. So the story, when you listen to Solomon, share with, very passionately his experience and the things that he had to endure for all those years that he was on the streets and struggling with addiction, it makes you to appreciate, very simple things, very small things that most of the time we take for granted. Acceptance, love, just someone telling you that they love you or even expressing it, and being accepted back into a community, into a family, regardless of how far you had gone, thinking that you had messed up everything. And what he is doing currently, just extending the same grace to people who are in the streets and, helping them to find their life back. It motivated me, it challenged me to really be sensitive. And even the way I look at street people is different now, because he asked a very simple question that currently when you walk on the streets, you will find a lot of people, begging and all that kind of thing. When a kid approaches you in the streets and asks you for money or for food, chances are you will give something. When a woman comes to you on the streets and asks for something, you might actually give something. But when a grown man approaches you on the streets begging and he's able, there's no challenge, you'll be like, this is a con. Like, nini, shida yako ni nini? So he said, a lot of these men who are in the streets have no one to actually understand their plight, and so we dismiss them on the go. So that is why he has been able to create that space that is specifically for men, not children, not women, for men in the streets, because he was there and someone extended grace and helped him to find back his life. So that really inspired me, and I think there are a lot of other stories as well that I've listened to, people who have been through so much in life, but they have ended up becoming one of the best and celebrated. Anne Matthew, for instance, she is the current vice chair for Langata. She went through so much. She lost, I think, half of her life in alcoholism. Little did she know that God would use the same experience that she has gone through to actually help now other people who are struggling with the same. So it's an amazing experience. The advice that I would give anyone who wants to be in the space that perhaps I am, where you're able to either create content, facilitate conversations, storytelling, or just as a digital content creator, is one, you have to realize that in life, you have to offer value. The mistake that majority of people would do is to go into a space because other people are there. So let me not be your inspiration for becoming a content creator, and yet you are not individually motivated from within to pursue this as a passion, because you'll get tired along the way. It has to be something that you can do with ease, without being coerced, without feeling pushed. It's something that you would wake up and do and feel like, yeah, it's what I want to do. I love it. And then once that has been taken care of, you have to find out what it takes to actually sustain that craft. So passion is not enough. You need to acquire the right skills. So this is a job like any other. You will not just come here because you are passionate and you want to be a content creator. This is a job. You have no skills. You don't even know where the camera, is, where the battery is supposed to be fixed. Like, you have no idea. So you have to inform yourself. You have to educate yourself, equip yourself with the right skills once you're passionate, so that it's not just passion, but it's also realistically driven by the fact that you know what is supposed to be done in that kind of field. So take time, study, read, find out from people who have been there, who are doing what you want to do, and see what you can be able to do perhaps differently to even make it better. And then finally, I talked about value addition. So as you begin to create content, it's not just content because you love it. It has to be content, or what makes it content is actually the fact that it adds value into someone else. When you are online looking for what to watch, you don't watch it because you really care about the person who is behind that content. You watch it because you feel it's something that is going to add value to you. So that is how everyone is. People are wired to be selfish, to only consume that which adds value to them. So as you are busy creating content, don't just create the content you love. Create content that is going to resonate and add value into someone else. So I think with those and many others, I think it would be a good place to begin. What would help you remain afloat even in the days that are rainy and you know you have no motivation to move forward is if you're passionate. So that's where passion now comes in. So when you're passionate about something, it doesn't mean that you will always have the right energy to do it. But what passion helps is, as much as there are days you'll wake up and you have no energy or motivation to do it, you will still realize that you will still plan to do it, even if it's later. So there are times, and the nature of the work that I do can take a toll mentally on me, because sitting here to listen to story after story after story, it's like it's a therapy session for them, and for me, I'm just taking in. So it can be overwhelming. It has been overwhelming in many instances. When that happens, I've been conscious enough to realize that I can actually break down in the process of helping other people remain standing. So I only consume or allow myself, subject myself to the limit. When I feel it's time to take a break, I take a break intentionally. So I don't wait for the stories to break me. I actually take a break when I need to, so that I can take care of my mental well-being, my health. And I'm not apologetic about it. So I've come to accept that as part of the work, that at some point you have to break away from this so that you can refresh, you can, get more inspiration and just clear your mind. Don't push yourself so much. You will break down, and that which you are passionate about will die with you. So you have to be intentional about mental health. You have to be intentional about taking breaks so that you can come back more energized and do that which you love doing. So once we share these stories online, there's a lot of feedback, much of which is very constructive. People just reaching out to express how they connect and resonate with the stories and the conversations. The best part is when you hear someone reaching out to say, I feel like finally I've found my voice. Someone has shared the very thing that I've been going through or I'm still going through. I thought I was alone. I'm really encouraged and inspired by the fact that, someone else has actually walked my path. They have gone through the things I have, and they're at a point where they're actually finding healing. I feel there's hope for me. That's very good feedback. Someone else just reaching out and saying, after listening to this story, I feel I have more responsibility to actually come out and also talk about my story that I've never opened up about, because I also want to find healing. And someone else just saying, I think this is the best story I've ever watched on the internet. It has inspired my life. I feel so motivated and encouraged. I wish it could end there. But unfortunately, you have a few elements who are just keyboard warriors, inspired by the desire to cause harm and havoc, just to destabilize everything that looks like it's a human being moving towards the right direction. So they are online not because they want to motivate or to share anything positive, but they just want to destroy. It's like people who are just bitter for nothing. Like, who hurt you? So someone is just looking for any opportunity for anyone to share or say anything so that they can comment and abuse and just demean and use very, negative language, not because they want to build anything or to correct. So when I see such feedback, as much as there's freedom of expression, this is my platform. It must stand for something. There's no way we are going to spend all this time and resources. And in fact, the person who has shared their story, that is their story. But there are people who think they know your story more than you. So they want to tell your story. They want to tell your story because they think, whatever it is you are sharing, and most of them are just suffering from their own traumas that they have not dealt with. So someone is struggling over things that they need to fix in their life, but they would rather spend that time imagining they can fix your life fast. So I don't allow such characters to dominate on the platform, because for the best, they want to begin to ignite a conversation. So they throw in a very negative comment so that you can begin to engage them. If there are such comments, you will just remove them, disable them from the platform, because it's taking away from that which then is constructive. Not to mean that we don't encourage dissenting feedback or someone with a contrary opinion. There are people who express themselves very well over something that has been shared, and they're like, I'm of a contrary opinion. In any case, this is what I think, but it remains to be my opinion. So they're not taking away from what the guest has said or what the other person has experienced. They're just sharing their perspective. That much is allowed. But for someone to come in and want to claim that they are the alpha and omega of what is true and what is not, I don't think that is something we would want to associate with. I'm not very good at advising people in terms of tips and all that, because I believe that life is not that conventional that my experience should inform what works for you. As much as there's a lot in terms of inspiration that come from our individual experiences, people should learn to contextualize that which is their environment, because it's going to inform the kind of solutions that would finally work for their life. So the problem of copy pasting and taking that which has worked for someone else and trying to use it in your context without understanding the dynamics sometimes can also even cause more problems. So my only advice would be, for one, first of all, to understand the context, the environment within which you operate. Be alive to the dynamics, be alive to the things that are informing how things and why things are happening in your life or in your space the way they are happening. If there's someone else who is doing something that you think you can borrow one or two things from, don't borrow blindly. Use that information, but put it into context so that it can work for you in your own environment. So when I started content creation, now as a career, I realized very fast that I was having a problem when it comes to equipment. So I had all these ideas in my head, I'm passionate, I have everything else that one needs to actually create content, but I was struggling when it comes to equipment. So what we used to do for the better part was to rent most of the equipment when it comes to cameras, lights, and all those things. But it was becoming very unsustainable, very costly, expensive to be renting every other time. So I was very intentional, because this is something I wanted to do long term. I wanted a partner, a local partner, through which I could be able to source equipment from to be able to sustain my craft. Before I came to learn about Cameras Africa, I was actually buying most of my equipment from the US directly. So I could go online from platforms that are able to sell and ship equipment, and try and get reviews from products that I could be able to before I buy. So I like doing a lot of my research before I buy any product. So I could go online, research about a specific product I want to buy, whether it's a camera or a lens or a light. And then once I'm convinced this is the right product I want to bring, of course I order and it comes. But sometimes it was very disappointing when you read all the reviews and everything looks very nice on paper, but when the product comes, you're very disappointed because it almost doesn't fit the bill. So I realized that the disconnect was because I'm buying something I have not seen physically, I have not touched, I have not tested. So it was very limiting that, buying from the US, it was a problem, because now I'm only seeing the product once I've already paid and it has been shipped. Unfortunately, the process of even returning in some instances is not even possible. So you end up having to just, it's a loss. So when I came to learn about Cameras Africa and the fact that they could actually offer and sell most of the products I was buying, internationally, I was very happy because before I buy any equipment, I could actually go and look at it, test, and see if it's something that I really need, or if it's what I thought it is, before I can put my resources into it. So that, I think, has been one advantage that Cameras Africa has offered when it comes to my line of work, because I'm able to invest in the right equipment because I have seen it, I have used it before I buy it. In my small bag, which I would prefer even walking out with, even when I'm not intentionally going to a shoot. Because sometimes you are in a space and you realize this is content and you wish you carried something. So what would that be? Or what would that look like? For me, it will be, of course, the wireless mic, very important, DSLR camera, lens, what's in that bag? ND filters, as much as someone would think it's not very important. Outdoor, you never know how much you need an ND filter until you are in the sun and everything is just as bright as it can get. So ND filters, microphone, camera, the right lenses, at least have a standard lens. If it's 24 to 70 and 70 to 200, I'm safe, covered. That focal range is enough. What else? Yeah, I think that's basic. That's more like it. The rest depends on the complexities of the particular production I'm going out for. But generally, that would be something that should not miss in that bag. And of course, a tripod. So currently, after being in the space for the last 4 years creating content, I have realized that content is not just content. Content is content when it's homegrown. That there are people who will consume it because of its proximity. So when it's close to me, when I can see myself in it, then I think it's important to me. So we realize that as much as we are creating content and posting on a platform that is accessible internationally, there are people who still feel like these stories are too far from them, so they don't relate as much. So what we have decided to do is to make it very palatable by creating or allowing people from different demographics and regions to share content from where they are. So we have segmented our platform in such a way that originally we just had shared moments with Just as a brand. But right now we are going the direction of having other smaller channels, not smaller per se, other affiliate channels. Say, for instance, right now we have Shared Moments Australia, that is just a space specifically created to enable conversations with and of people living or residing in Australia. So that, it's their channel. So they're inspiring the world, yes, but speaking from the context of their environment and their demographic. We have Shared Moments America, and so that is the direction that we are going. Other than that, we want to have our impact felt beyond just online. So what we have done is we have tried to create a network, both of the guests that we have hosted and the extended community that is of our followers, so that beyond just online, we have forums where we invite people to actually come and now actualize these conversations. Every year we host what we are calling Break the Silence movement. So at the end of the year, we invite any person who has been part of this forum or these productions for that year and the years past to come physically to meet most of them for the first time. They're coming, meeting, seeing each other for the first time. Oh, this is the person who was talking about this. And we invite our audience as well to be part of the forum. We invite legislators, we invite human rights activists, we invite every other person, mental health experts, and we have a full day filled with activities that are meant to capitalize on the network and the movement, so that it's not just an online thing. We are impacting people's lives in real time. We are making sure that legislative-wise, we are having laws that then would be able to make a difference. If there's a story we did of a human rights violation, then we make sure that there's a follow-up. If this is a person who needs a lawyer, we connect them in that kind of space. if this is a person who needs, mental health assistance, we make sure that we lead them to where they are supposed to get that kind of help. So that in itself, for me, has been very helpful to make sure that we are not just content creators, but we are people who are contributing to the well-being of our society. And finally, we have also realized, as much as we talked about being present internationally in those kind of regions, even locally, the content in terms of the topics, the conversations we share, not everyone would want to listen to stories of addiction. But you'll have someone who just wants to hear stories on relationships. So we have decided to also segment our content in those themes. So we have created other affiliate channels that are specific to certain conversations. The latest being, we have a channel we have established that shares stories on just dating. So it's a dating stories channel, and it's picking up pretty well. People just coming to share their banter, the things that they can't even imagine ni wao walikuwa wanapitia ama walikuwa wanafanya. So it's such an amazing show we are having. We have a platform for reproductive health conversations, where people just get to learn more about their reproductive health and the things that they can do to make their reproductive health even much better. We have a platform on wellness, just speaking about general well-being. So the challenge is there's so many things I want to do, but all these things are very time-consuming and resource intensive. So there's a lot that is in the pipeline. What we are currently actively doing is to find the right partnerships so that it becomes a little easier to do all these things. When you're doing everything alone, it can be overwhelming. For the better part, we have been funding most of these things from our pocket, and it's not sustainable. So right now we are actively trying to reach out so that if there are partners who believe in the cause of what we are actually pursuing, then we can hold hands and do more. So the Prison Chronicles would be one thing I would really love to continue doing. And so we hope that time will allow and resources will also be available for us to do all that. So if you'd like to connect with us, we are on all social media platforms as Shared Moments with Justas. Of course, we have other affiliate channels, like I've said. The Dating Stories is also on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all that. But generally, let's say you just want to connect or to even come and share your story, you can send us an email at mystory@sharedmomentswithjustas.net. That's the email address if you have a story you'd like to share or anything general information, info@sharedmomentswithjustas.net, or even reach us out through the WhatsApp number, which I think can be shared in the graphics. Yeah, but I'm glad and waiting to see you. While at it, please subscribe to our channels. There are many, but yeah, we want you happy. Cameras Africa, equipping storytellers.